Hi everybody, Dana Litwin here again, and welcome back to Tuesday Tips for Leaders of Volunteers. This week, talking about some highlights from the recent Points of Light conference. If you were able to attend, let me know in the comments what you think. Did you get some of these same impressions or takeaways or highlights from the sessions you attended? If you weren't there, then also comment on what you would like to learn about and maybe dive deeper into of the general topics and highlights that I mentioned here today. I'm happy to do more Tuesday Tips that dive more into some of the sessions, not only that I presented, but that others presented as well, and maybe get them as guests or returning guests in many cases to the channel. So the main theme of Points of Light 2025 in New Orleans, Louisiana, was the power of volunteering. Volunteering is no longer just nice, it's necessary. And that ties into the recent research that Points of Light did with the Bridgespan group that I talk about in these Tuesday tips. So that directly ties into the research from nice to necessary, the power of volunteering, and the conference themes. Within the power of volunteering theme, there was a lot of focus on creating community, repairing or building trust with the community, which also automatically helps with donor and volunteer and advocacy and engagement, focusing on hope instead of fear, and increasing civic engagement. And many sessions and panels and workshops address the current difficulty in scenario planning with, at least in the United States, the cuts to national and federal funds like AmeriCorps, which includes Volunteer Generation Fund, and FEMA cuts and disaster response in general, not just AmeriCorps disaster response, but other government agencies, and the chaos and uncertainty that that creates, which I've also had to do a lot of videos about. But one panel host who runs disaster services for the state of Louisiana commented that any kind of definitive answer about federal funding would be better than this back and forth and in the courts and maybe yes and maybe no, because if you have a definitive answer, at least you can strategically plan for that and budget for that, instead of, again, this kind of limbo that a lot of agencies and other nonprofits are in because of the state of the federal administration right now and the cuts that are pending. Other major themes included ethical storytelling, apologizing and reducing harm that may have happened within a community, or addressing harm or trauma in the community, more details and models for data-driven metrics, like metrics that matter, that are good at making the case for funding strategic volunteer engagement, specifically asking funders for it and how to make the case for that, which, again, Points of Light and other research has proven is a really effective thing to do, is make that case. And that volunteerism is changing due to generational movements. Boomers and Gen X are starting to get to retirement age, so there's increased turnover, and then with some mergers of larger nonprofits, or especially in the U.S. healthcare system, a lot of hospitals and healthcare agencies are merging together, so some people are getting laid off, but there's also just increased turnover, staff turnover in general, because we tend to be undervalued and underpaid from volunteers themselves, especially younger generations. They want things that are more accessible, more flexible, usually a decreased commitment time, either for training or doing the volunteer shifts themselves. And there is a big jump in integrated giving, so a lot of apps or software programs or opportunities to connect, making a micro donation to a micro or macro volunteering opportunity. And of course, the topic that everybody is talking about all the time: what's going on with AI, and where is it, and how is it working, and when is it not working, and is it ethical at all to do it in the state of the world? All of those topics were floating around the conference. Points of Light itself is also shifting from a few years ago. They had more of a corporate or CSR or employee volunteering focus, and they're shifting, much to all of our delight, back to more volunteer engagement professionals, VEPs, and volunteer engagement tracks itself. So I'm glad to see that. In response to the many challenges that we're facing in the nonprofit sector, not just in the USA, but around the world, there were models and examples of success where many smaller or especially rural nonprofits are merging, or at least, if not merging, are seamlessly partnering as coalitions or alliances to share technology, where each one of those organizations alone probably couldn't afford a complex volunteer management software system and the cost to set that up, but maybe 5 or 6 or 10 or 12 of them can share that database, especially in smaller communities where there's going to be a lot of overlap with volunteers working for different agencies at different times throughout their life cycle or throughout their career. I think that that's a really positive change. Some other kind of technical or tech sector things that were happening that I started to hear about a little bit before Points of Light, but had many more detailed conversations, is there is a huge increase and a lot of interest from private equity in the private sector investing in volunteer management software, kind of getting that attention, and a lot of money is pouring into that. There's also a shift in not just how people are using technology because of AI or not because of AI, but kind of addressing that digital divide. So Points of Light itself announced that they hope to invest $100 million by 2034, so over the next 9 years, in doubling the number of volunteers that are engaged. Their research showed that only about 50% on average volunteer shifts are filled, and so they're hoping to get this at least $100 million investment, maybe more with some other funding partners, to really help pump up volunteer engagement and civic engagement in general. Along with this trend, there's also this kind of tech trend, the justserve.org, which is run by the LDS Church. They're expanding from not just volunteer job listings among their worldwide organization, but also developing some volunteer management software. So they're kind of investing in expanding their presence in the tech space. Of course, you heard in my Jennifer Bennett interview that Idealist recently merged with Volunteer Match, so that there's going to be an update to both of those platforms for nonprofit job listings and volunteer listings very soon, I think in the next few months this summer. There is more interest in the topic that I wrote about for Engage with my colleague Todd McMullen. We wrote 4 articles in the last couple of years about digital care circles and kind of how can we use the power of technology with spontaneous volunteerism tied into formal and informal volunteerism and kind of organizing that into a digital care circle. Those are some of the trends that we saw in Points of Light. Again, if you were there and you heard different things in different topics, absolutely please add to the conversation in the comments below. And I'm happy to dive deeper into more topics and sessions from the conference as you requested. So I hope you have a great rest of the week. Take care. We'll see you next time with more Tuesday Tips.